Mr. Garcia is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a single amendment at the table. I ask for unanimous consent to have it considered read.
Okay, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes on his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment would prohibit funds made available in this bill from being used for the California high-speed rail project. California's high-speed rail is a bloody program that is acting like a giant lead anchor on any meaningful infrastructure bill. Since its beginning in 2008, the California high-speed rail project has suffered from an endless series of delays and costly failures. The proposed LA to San Francisco line was originally estimated to cost only $33 billion, with operations beginning in 2020. And since then, costs have spiraled out of control, with the new price tag sitting at $100 billion and at least another decade for services to start. Several reports over the years highlighted the serious mismanagement of the project, which include wildly inaccurate cost estimates, poor planning, and a lack of transparency and use of funds that have resulted in these extensive cost overruns and project delays. This year, Congress decided to bring back earmarks in the form of community project funding, which is a decision I supported. And among one of the conditions of these earmarks, we have to have matching requirements in order to receive funding. And although matching funds were not required to be in hand prior to requesting a project, local officials at least had to have a plan to meet such requirements in order for the project to be considered viable, to ensure that the taxpayer dollars weren't being spent on poorly planned and unworthy projects. Imagine a member of Congress requesting a CPF funding for a project with the same mismanagement problems, lack of transparency, and inaccurate cost estimates as this California high-speed rail project comes with. They would be laughed out of the room, and for good reason. In 2019, the federal government canceled $29 million in unused federal funds for the venture due to persistent, unmitigated delays and mismanagement, which led California to file a lawsuit. Unsurprisingly, and just recently, the Biden administration recently finalized a settlement with California to restore that support of $929 million. This is irresponsible, and to give you a sense of how big this number is, there's only $625 million in our bill today for all of passenger rail projects. This country has a real pressing infrastructure need. We're diverting precious taxpayer dollars away from countless deserving projects across America because of projects like this that deserve to die. And instead of spending that money on this unmitigated disaster of a project, we should be doing the right thing and investing these funds in meaningful rail projects. By the way, Californians don't want this high-speed rail project. This is something that originally voted with a very slim margin of victory about 10 years ago, and it was then for a bond of only $10 billion, not the current price tag of $100 billion. I urge the adoption of my amendment, and I yield back.
Mr. Price.
Madam Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment. Our colleague has provided us a parade of horribles with respect to California high-speed rail, so maybe I should provide a reality check. This bill doesn't fund California high-speed rail. It doesn't even mention California high-speed rail. The bill before us does not fund this project or any other project, makes no references to California high-speed rail. The bill simply provides robust funding for competitive grants. Now, the California high-speed rail program is eligible to apply for competitive grants, just like hundreds of other projects in our districts around the country. But the bill doesn't specify a fund for this project, nor does it require the Department of Transportation to fund this project or any other project. The department will issue notices of funding opportunities for the various competitive grant programs funded in this bill. Eligible applicants will apply for projects, and then the department will evaluate those applications and make decisions on which projects to fund through a fair and equitable process. This is how it always works for a competitive grant program at DOT and how it should continue to work. It is not the purpose of our committee to dictate either acceptance or rejection of specific projects. That's exactly, however, what this amendment would do, singling out a project, preventing it from even having a chance to compete. It's not a good idea, and I urge my colleagues to reject it.
Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Thank you. I don't, thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't think I can add to what the sponsor of the amendment, Mr. Garcia, said, other than the fact that, you know, there is a time when you have a project that is so disastrous that we need to pull the plug. And so keep in mind that this was supposed to be carrying passengers in 2020, by the way. Where is it? It's nowhere to be found. The only thing that this project is doing is just increasing in price, sucking up money, and it's sucking up money that needs to go to, frankly, really important projects that are ready to go and that are needed and that are effective and efficient. So again, rarely, again, to Mr. Garcia's point, let me tell you, speaking for myself, if anybody would have come with a project for a member project, and it would have landed on my desk with the record, the standards, whether it's cost overruns, whether all these things, he's right. I admit this. I would have had to laugh, except that this is not a laughing matter. This is big money that should be going to real, good projects, and the chairman is right. There's nothing in the bill that says that the money goes to high-speed rail. But I think all of us, even those who support high-speed rail, should recognize that when you have a dog, when you know it's the biggest white elephant in the room, this is probably a good time to pull the plug. I support the amendment.
Are there any other members who would wish to be heard on the amendment? Ms. Lee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise in opposition to this amendment, which is really designed to punish the state of California, where the gentleman from California comes from who is presenting this amendment. It doesn't target a special set-aside, and I believe that this amendment really misrepresents the facts, as our chairman laid out. It would simply prevent our state, your state, Mr. Garcia, from competing for rail investments that every other single state in the country has the right to compete for. In order to get access to this funding, our state, California, Mr. Garcia, has to put together a high-speed rail project that can win on the merits. I believe that we can do that based on the needs in our state, your state, Mr. Garcia, and our track record of project management. But we deserve the chance to compete. If we lose, so be it. But don't single out your state, my state of California, and take that choice away from our residents. I think a lot of Republicans think that our state, your state, California, is an easy target. But our state, your state, Mr. Garcia, my state, is home to almost 40 million tax-paying residents. We deserve the same right in California, my state, your state, Mr. Garcia, to compete for federal investments as every other state. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment.
Mr. Valadao.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Garcia, for bringing this amendment up. As another California resident, and I know California's come up a lot today, and I apologize to my colleagues for that. But high-speed rail has been an interesting project. I've not been a fan of it from the very beginning, but it is actually being built as we speak in my district. I get to drive by the mounds of dirt that they've put up over the last few years and wonder if they'll ever actually finish this project. The frustrating part with this project is when it started out at $33 billion when it was originally put on a ballot for election, it was $10 billion from each private, federal, and state. Now we're up over $100 billion. The project was originally over 800 miles. Now I think we're somewhere around 200 to 300 miles. And they keep lowering the amount of miles because they can't seem to keep the cost under $100 billion. Obviously, it's a government program. We know government programs always get out of control. But the biggest problem with this one is the way they've been treating our locals. We've had some severe fights with them over the way they've treated some of our cities, our communities, our counties, and even some camps that we had. We had a farm labor camp in Wasco that they decided to have them evacuate and shut down. They've left that facility now. It's going to be a cost to that little city, that little community, about $10 million. $10 million is not something the city of Wasco can afford. But now they're left on the hook for this project because high-speed rail decided they wanted that community evacuated and emptied out, and it's now become a center for crime, a center for for folks that actually take vehicles or equipment that they steal, place for gangbangers to go do drugs or continue their illegal activities, and it's just become a big problem for those local business owners and those local homeowners in that area. And then you've got the way they treated the farmers themselves, going right through their property. Originally, the project was supposed to go on an existing corridor, either 99, 5, rail that's there, Burlington Northern or Union Pacific, but they chose their own path, and so they just cut right down the middle of people's properties and cities, and it hasn't worked out like they thought. And so there has to be a serious conversation on this. I'm thrilled that Garcia brought this up. I think it's a good amendment. I think we should support it, and if not, at least have the conversation about making sure we hold them accountable with the dollars that they do have, because we have a lot of very good projects around the country that probably deserve this money more than high-speed rail does. So I appreciate the time, and I yield back.
Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's really unfortunate that we're having this conversation to once again target the state of California, the 5th largest global economy, simply because my colleagues are unhappy about a voter-approved project. The voters voted
for $10 billion
for this project, whether we liked it or not. I didn't vote for it as a voter for this project, but when the voters demanded that California begin to explore other options of transportation, this was another option. And if it's out of budget, maybe my colleagues need to look in the mirror. Number one, they demanded, some of my colleagues demanded that this project begin in Central Valley. Had we been able to not have where the project would start dictated by the voters, maybe we could have chose a different area to begin this project that was more populated, that actually really wanted this project, like San Diego, like maybe LA, maybe San Francisco. But no, Central Valley insisted that this project begin in Central Valley. Why? Because they were dying of jobs. They didn't have jobs. Just like water is drying up, their jobs were drying up. Therefore, they saw as an opportunity to be able to bring jobs to the region. But then what do? They turned around and put up obstacle after obstacle after obstacle, gumming up the issues, filing lawsuits to the tune of where we are now. We may not like California's high-speed rail authority or how they have managed it. Well, then let California legislature and governor know and have them fix it. But this project has provided and opened up opportunities for feeder rails that communities like in Southern California that I represent, that other colleagues represent, have been able to draw down money and build up capacity with light rail that will eventually feed passengers to the high-speed rail infrastructure. I think that we have really gone out of our way in this amendment to stick it in the eye of California. I am a Californian, I'm a proud Californian, and I will not knock down my state because of politics. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this misguided amendment.
Mr. Calvert.
Yeah, let's talk about that proposition that was on the ballot. It was a $10 billion proposition. This is up to $100 billion. $100 billion. Do the math. 300 miles into $100 billion. You could buy an airline ticket for every man, woman, and child for the next 50 years to fly to San Francisco rather than build this project. This is the largest waste of money in the history of projects in the United States. I can't think of anything more wasteful than this project. Polling in our state, by the way, shows that nearly 70% of the people in the state now are opposed to this project because of the waste of money. Why do we put good money after bad money in a boondoggle of all boondoggles of all? This is crazy. We ought to join the gentleman and vote for this amendment just to send a message to these people in California that want to just spend this money and spend us into oblivion. That I yield back.
Are there any other members wishing to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute to close on his amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This really is about taking care of our beautiful state of California and not wasting precious taxpayer dollars on a program that's going to go nowhere and end up being exorbitant. I support meaningful rail improvements. I support high-speed rail projects, just not this one. This isn't high-speed rail. This is actually what I would call Franken-rail. And like Dr. Frankenstein's monster, this contraption isn't smart, it's not pretty, it stinks, it's clumsily meandering through our communities and scaring the hell out of the residents. It's sucking up all of our time and resources, and it was created and kept alive by science fiction and by politicians who are creating acts that actually defy physics and economics. We don't need this high-speed rail in California. We can't afford this high-speed rail in California, and neither can our federal government, who should be investing in meaningful infrastructure bills. I urge support of this amendment, and I yield back.
Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California?
I really like that guy.